Hi there, Sarah Mitchell here from Inspired Education Services, and today I want to talk to you about how to teach kids to read and spell. Now, there's a lot of information about how to teach kids to read and spell. Some of it is amazing, some of it not so good. So today I'm going to pick apart some of that for you. If you would like to see more videos like this, please don't forget to hit like, share this video, and subscribe to this channel so you can see all the videos that I am making for you. If you stay to the end, I've got all of the information that I'm talking about today summarized for you already, so I'm going to show you how to get your hands on that if you stick all the way through to the end. This one is for teachers or learning support teachers who are looking to make sure that what they're doing with their literacy teaching is the very best thing that they can do by their students. I've used this approach to literacy for the last 10 years now to rapidly accelerate the progress of my dyslexic students, but it's equally as effective in accelerating the progress of kids that don't have dyslexia. It's just critical for the kids that do. So let's dive right in. I've got 10 tips for you today. The first one that I want to talk to you about is something called structured literacy. Now, structured literacy is a term coined by the International Dyslexia Association, and it's an approach to teaching literacy that makes sure that we teach all of the key elements that make up English language. So I'm going to talk you through all of those today. And many years ago, I read the research of Marion Wolf and Kate Kane and Kate Nation and Louisa Moats and Marsha Henry and John Hattie and all these people, and thought I had come up with this amazing new approach, and it was so unique and all these things, but actually I found later it had already been invented, and this is what the International Dyslexia Association recommend that we teachers use in our classrooms. So the second point that I want to talk to you about today, so diving into what is structured literacy and how do we go about actually doing this, the first thing that a literacy program needs to be is diagnostic. Now, what do I mean by that? Diagnostic teaching is where we assess the kids' current level before we dive in teaching. And we do this for a couple of reasons. One, we don't want to waste time teaching things that the kids already know because it wastes precious classroom time. But the other thing we want to make sure that we do is address any gaps that they might have and meet them at their current level. So as we work through the program, we can be sure that we're not leaving any gaps, that we're not over teaching things that they already know, and that we're moving through a program systematically. That brings me on to my next thing that your literacy program needs to include, and it must be explicit. So what is explicit teaching? It's basically an approach where teachers take on the role of carefully and specifically explaining concepts to students in a really, really structured way. So it's earned a bit of a reputation for being dry and boring in modern education, where we tend to favour things like student-centred learning, where we provide the children with an experience and kind of let them explore it and discover things themselves. There's definitely a time and a place for that kind of thing, but in literacy teaching, it's really, really critical that we explicitly explain how the English code works. Why? Because reading is not natural. It is not something that a human brain will pick up just through exposure, just through practice, just through repetition. It needs careful explanation. The next thing your program needs to be is structured and systematic. And what does this mean? It means that you follow a clear progression that works all the way from beginning through to end, and make sure that you don't miss anything and that you don't leave anything up to chance. So usually we move through stages of phonemic awareness, individual letter sounds, learning phonic patterns, morphology, etymology, and all of these things to make sure that we have taught everything that there is that the students need to know in order to be able to master it. Your literacy program also needs to include instruction in phonemic awareness and phonics. Now, phonemic awareness is the awareness of individual sounds in spoken words. So, for example, the word cat has 3 phonemes: k, at. The word frog has 4 phonemes: f, r, o, g. And the word 6 also has 4 phonemes: s, I, k, s. Now, there is no other example in life where somebody would come up to you and say how many phonemes are in a specific word, other than in the example of reading and spelling. But if the child can't really hear, detect, and manipulate those individual sounds in spoken language, it then becomes really difficult for them to learn how to map those sounds onto the symbols or the letters that we use to represent them in written language. So it's a really important step. From phonemic awareness, we need to make sure that the children have phonics awareness. Now, phonics is the mapping of the use of letters to represent sounds in spoken language. So, for example, quite often the letter S represents the sound S, or the letters AI as a combination represent the sound A. So this is really important to teach explicitly because, again, we don't want children having to kind of just figure out the code themselves, hoping that they pick it up through memorizing a bunch of words. It's much more efficient if we teach them explicitly. The next thing your literacy program needs to include is explicit teaching in syllables. Now, syllables, breaking words into syllables can be a more efficient way once we've moved past single syllable words where we can use sounding out of phonic patterns to break down a word in order to be able to read it. So, for example, in a word like important, it is possible to sound it out if we go I, M, P, or T, N, T. But we've got to hold a lot of sounds in our mind to be able to do that. And for kids with working memory problems, that can be a real challenge. So a slightly more effective way of helping them with that is showing them that that can be broken into 3-syllable chunks, important, and read like that, so that it's less load on their working memory. The next thing your literacy program needs to include is my personal favourite topic, instruction in morphology and etymology. Now, what is that? Morphology is, put simply, the study of prefixes, bases, and suffixes. These are morphemes, or units of meaning in English, and we reuse them all the time, combined in different ways, to construct new words or build new words. We often think about words as being the smallest unit of meaning in English, but actually, morphemes are. So, for example, in the word action, we've got a base element ACT and a suffix element ION. And you can see that when we put the word act and we add a suffix on the end, it shifts the pronunciation of the letters in that word quite significantly. So where we have act and the T making a sound in action, we have the TI combination, which in multisyllabic words quite often makes a sh sound. So showing students how we construct words out of morphemes is really important, especially for those kids who you might have noticed their spelling is quite phonetically correct, as in they've sounded the word out and they have used some plausible guesses, but it's just completely wrong. They're probably really not aware of how morphemes and spelling rules are used to build larger words. Etymology is the study of word history and origins. So, for example, I used to do this myself, a lot of teachers are teaching the word school as just one of those crazy, irregular English words that, who knows why we spell things the way we do. It's so nuts, isn't it? It's actually not. School is related to words like scholar and scholastic, which we borrowed out of Greek. And in Greek, the CH combination makes a k sound. So in order to keep some of the word's history, we kept the spelling and also the pronunciation. So there's a perfectly logical reason of why that letter combination is in that word. And teaching these things to kids can help them make sense of the English code. The next thing that your literacy program needs to include is instruction in semantics. Now, semantics is concerned with the meaning behind words and language. So it dives a little bit deeper than sometimes we use kind of 2D methods of teaching semantics in classrooms, things like saying a word and telling the kids the meaning, or giving them a words list and having them look the word up in a dictionary. There's nothing wrong with these approaches, but it's really important that we dive quite a bit deeper when we're teaching vocabulary. So teaching things like that words can have multiple meanings. So if we think of the example sign, it seems like a really basic one-syllable word to us, but a sign can be a literal stop sign, something that you can see and touch and feel. It could be something that you do on a document, you can sign a document, or it could even have a really abstract meaning like, I saw a black cat today and it's a sign that I'm going to have a terrible day if I was superstitious. So even small words like that can have lots of different meanings in different contexts, and it's not always obvious to kids that that's the case. So it's really important, again, that we explicitly teach that and dive really deeply into the way that we use words in slightly different ways in different contexts. Another important part of semantics is talking about pragmatic language use. So, for example, sayings like, it's raining cats and dogs. Some kids might think well, that's a really bizarre thing to say, but not realizing the teacher doesn't necessarily mean there will literally be cats and dogs falling out of the sky, but that it's going to be raining really, really heavily. So we need to explore some of those unexpected uses of English as well with our kids to make sure that they understand and they can comprehend text when they come across them. The next thing that your literacy program has to include is instruction in syntax. Now, syntax is concerned with the order of words in sentences and the different jobs or parts of speech that words can do. So, for example, we have nouns, which are naming words, verbs, doing words, adjectives, which are describing words, and the ways that we can rearrange these types of words or word jobs to make sentences. And this is really important not only for kids to be able to comprehend text as they read it, but also to make really wise vocabulary choices when they're constructing sentences in their writing, so that they can really accurately and specifically convey what they meant. The last and one of the most important things that your literacy program needs to include is mastery. Now, mastery is making sure that each child in the class has absolutely learned their words list, that they've got some fluency in reading and spelling those words, and that we make sure that we come back and regularly revise and repeat and make sure that the students have retained that information. Because if you don't achieve mastery in the first round of teaching, it's pretty unlikely that you're going to be able to read or spell those words well later on down the track. And for kids with learning difficulties, with the curve of forgetting, it's really important that we do repeat it over time. So sometimes even when a child does achieve mastery in the first round, we might come back 6 weeks later, and I'm sure I've got a bunch of teachers nodding their heads right now. They'll score really well on that Friday weekly spelling test, but come back 6 weeks later and they're spelling it incorrectly again. So we just need to keep topping up and doing little revision activities and making sure that the children are revising and achieving mastery. So if you've enjoyed this video, I would love to hear your comments in the comments below. Please let me know your thoughts, questions, comments. I would love to hear from you. Don't forget to share, like, and subscribe. And if you are interested in a written summary of what I've talked about with you today, there is a link in the comments section below where you can download a blog, and I've summarized all of this for you. I'll see you over in the next video.